So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 10, which is entitled Deliverance of the Yamala Arjuna Trees. And we're reading text 10 through 12. So we'll take them one at a time. I'll read the first verse in Sanskrit, the translation, and the purport. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is 10, 10, 10. Deva samgitam apyante krimi vid basma samgitam bhuta druk tat krite svartam kim veda nirayo yatha. Translation. This is Narada Muni speaking. While living, one may be proud of one's body, thinking oneself a very big man, minister, president, or even demigod. But whatever one may be, after death, this body will turn either into worms, into stool, or into ashes. If one kills poor animals to satisfy the temporary whims of this body, one does not know what he will suffer in his next birth, for such a sinful miscreant must go to hell and suffer the results of his actions. Purport. In this verse, the three words krimi, vid, basma are significant. After death, the body may become krimi, which means worms. For if the body is disposed of without cremation, it may be eaten by worms, or else it may be eaten by animals like hogs and vultures and be turned into stool. Those who are more civilized burn the dead body, and thus it becomes ashes. Basma samyitam. Yet although the body will be turned into worms, stool, or ashes, foolish persons, just to maintain it, commit many sinful activities. This is certainly regrettable. The human form of body is actually meant for jivasya tattva jigyasa, enlightenment and knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, one must seek shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Tasmad gurum prapadyeta. One must approach a guru. Who is a guru? Shabde pare chanishnatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, 3rd Chapter, Text 21. A guru is one who has full transcendental knowledge. Unless one approaches a spiritual master, one remains in ignorance. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. That's from the Chandogya Upanishad 6.14.2. One has full knowledge about life when one is Acharyavan, controlled by the Acharya. But when one is conducted by Rajaguna and Tamaguna, one does not care about anything. Instead, one acts like an ordinary foolish animal, risking his life. Mrityu samsaravartmani. That means the path of repeated birth and death. And therefore continuing to go through suffering after suffering. Ate vidusvarta katim hi Vishnu. This is a verse from the Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, 5th Chapter, 31st verse. Such a foolish person does not know how to elevate himself in this body. Instead, he indulges in sinful activities and goes deeper and deeper into hellish life. Om Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Miditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Adi Purush Prabhu, Arjuna Prabhu, ask for your blessings. May our words be aligned with Guru Parampara. May the devotees be benefited by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam together. And may our Lord Shri Shri Radha Mulidhar, Shri Gaur Chandra be pleased with this effort to share Bhagavatam together. Okay, so again, 10th canto, 10th chapter, which is entitled Deliverance of the Yamala Arjuna Trees. And we're reading text 10 through 12. So we're hearing about the sublime pastimes of Krishna, specifically the Damodar Lila. And we're hearing how Krishna very soon will liberate these two personalities, Nalakubara and Manigriva. And those two personalities were previously cursed by Narada Muni. So at the beginning of this chapter, Parikshit Maharaj, he asks a question. He asks, what caused Narada Muni to curse these two demigods? What caused that? And so, the story goes, Narada Muni was walking along the Ganges and he came upon these two demigods who were devotees of Lord Shiva. And they were totally intoxicated. The first intoxication is just the pride. They were powerful demigods, associates of Lord Shiva, beautiful, wealthy. This is an intoxication. Where does that pride, come from? Sometimes we just say, don't be proud, be humble. But we have to see what causes pride. What comes before pride so that we can understand what to do to overcome it. Before there can be pride, there's identification with the material body and the material mind, right? Just like these demigods, they were identifying that we are associates of Lord Shiva. We are powerful. This got into them. And the identification gives you something to be proud of. Like when we identify with our upbringing, our education, maybe the association we have, whatever it is, it starts with me identifying with the body, with the mind. And everybody has pride. We can think, well, I don't have such good karma, so what is there to be proud of? I'm not wealthy. I'm not highly educated. And then there's still pride, but it comes out in a different way. It comes out as resenting. It comes out as resentment, like, this is unfair. This is unfair that I don't have these things, that I'm not these things. I have nothing. I'm useless. I was born in a terrible situation. And that's a kind of anger and resentment there. And that's how the pride manifests, as resentment. So if you have things and you identify with them, you become puffed up kind of pride. You become proud in a puffed up way. But there's also this other form of pride where you don't have those things and you're just damaged and hurt. And you're resenting others who do have it. Right? You're resenting life. You're resenting life for this bad luck, so-called bad luck. So anyway, these two demigods, they had this pride, which is we kind of move further and further from the soul when we're feeling this pride, this identification with what I have, with who I am in this life. And also they were intoxicated from there, intoxicated with liquor also. And they were, these two demigods, they were naked. They were senselessly and shamelessly just enjoying, with these other ladies that were there in the water. And at that time, Narada Muni walks by. And this is important too. The ladies who were there, they felt some shame. They saw Narada Muni and they suddenly woke up and what are we doing? And they were embarrassed and they covered themselves and just withdrew. So that's an important lesson because we may do things that are wrong or make mistakes, but if we feel the shame and then we rectify, we rectify ourselves, then we're kind of correcting ourselves. And that's good. But if there's no shame, these two demigods, when they saw Narada Muni, they were so audacious that they didn't even care. Oh, here's the great Narada Muni, the pure devotee. But they didn't even care. They didn't even feel embarrassed. They just kept doing what they were doing. No shame. So therefore, the correction that's necessary becomes much more acute, becomes much more serious. See, we can correct ourselves when you make mistakes, there's repentance, there's feeling of shame, there's amending the situation, rectifying things. And that way you make it easier for yourself by correcting yourself. But if you don't correct yourself, if you feel no shame, if you feel no regret, then you'll be corrected by the material energy in the form of karmic reaction. And it will be more serious because the covering is deeper. So then the reaction becomes more acute. So Narada Muni, it's not that he's just, walking around looking to curse people. Actually, out of his mercy, he gives a curse to these two demigods because he sees, there's a verse coming up that says, actually, he wants to relieve them of their pride. So to diminish their pride, he is going to curse them. And what we're hearing in today's verse, these few verses, are words that he's speaking to them to wake them up. He speaks very sharp words to wake them up. Sometimes that's necessary. Chitva in Sanskrit, chitva means like to cut. The words may sometimes cut. They may be very sharp. Why? Because for some of us, it's effective. It can awaken us from the spell of Maya, from the spell of illusion that we're under, right? We talked about the pride as a kind of intoxication, misidentification. And it's a spell that comes over us, and we lose ourselves, we lose our souls. We lose the sense of our higher nature when we're under this spell of Maya. This subject is, I wanted to speak something about this today, the subject of Maya-tattva. Maya-tattva, there are different tattvas, and this is a very special thing within Krishna consciousness, that we have all these tattvas that are explained. There's the jiva tattva. Tattva means like principle, the principle of the jiva. There's Krishna tattva, the principle of Krishna, and you understand certain truths about Krishna. Right? There's Nam tattva. There's the tattva of the name of God, the science of it. And there's Maya tattva. There's the science of Maya, understanding it. So what is Maya actually? I remember this class I heard from Srila Prabhupada many years ago, this beautiful class, and he was mentioning that we actually love Krishna already. We have love for Krishna. But something is blocking that. Something is interrupting that. What is it? There's an energy that's interrupting that experience. And he said that is called Maya. That is the energy of Maya. And that impacted me so much, even though it's such a simple point. That actually there is a love flowing from me to Krishna right now even. But something is blocking it. I'm under an influence that blocks it. And so Maya is like a fundamental illusion. And all living beings are under this illusion. There's only three possibilities. You're either under Maya, or you're starting to observe it. You're starting to see it. Just like right now we're discussing it, right? We're discussing the tattva, the truth about Maya. That's also a stage where you're starting to now see it, observe it. And hopefully you're not just seeing it out there in others, but we're also looking, we're understanding when I myself I'm being influenced by this. All right. And we can also start to see it on the spot while it's happening. How, I'm speaking these words, I'm thinking this way, and we catch ourselves. This is because of these words and what I'm thinking right now. It's not coming from my soul. So that will help us to realize that, to let go of certain inclinations and thoughts and words that we may be speaking. It's nice when we can catch it on the spot. That's another level of advancement. Usually we do something under the influence of Maya and regret it later. When we think about it, that's good. But another level is while you're doing it, while you're speaking a certain way, while you're feeling ego, the false ego or pride, or reacting to somebody with ego, in the moment you catch yourself and you calm down, you take a moment, you take a breath, you realize what's actually happening, and you try to get centered back into your true self. Speak from there. Think from there. Another thing that's important to understand about Maya is so long we're under Maya, the influence of Maya, which every living being is, then there's no real solution to problems. There's no real solution to anything. It's like we come up with a solution. We're under Maya, under an influence, a covering. We lost the awareness of our true nature, our souls, our relationship to God. We lost that awareness. We're covered. And then we have so many, that will create so many problems. But we find we're looking for solutions while we remain under the influence of Maya. You see? And so that solution may give some temporary relief to the problem, but we'll always see that it actually creates another problem. If you could really look back at history and see, you'll see there are solutions to certain situations, and But then you see, because it's not deep enough, because we don't go deep enough into the real problem, then these little temporary solutions will again create another problem. And it goes on like this. The example is given like a dream. So, suppose you're dreaming at night and you come across a particular problem, right? And then in the dream, you come up with a solution and you solve it, but you're still dreaming. So the real problem is not solved. The real problem is that you're dreaming. You're actually lying in a bed sleeping. The real thing to do is wake up. To wake up. That's the real solution. So all the problems, all the good and bad things in this world, the duality, the problems, and then there's problem solvers, and then we're figuring all these things out. We're struggling just with our minds but none of us are admitting and realizing that we're totally covered right now. And all the solutions in a covered state will only create more problems again in the future. So the only real desire is to want to wake up from this, to want to wake up from the spell, from the dream of Maya. Even we can be so-called religious and we can still be, the whole thing could be under the spell of Maya. Right? So it's not that now I'm a devotee of Krishna and I'm awake. Now I'm a Christian, I'm awake. Now I'm on the path. Not necessarily. That whole thing can be accepted and lived under the influence of Maya with the false ego. I mean, we know that, right? Look what religions can do to each other in the name of God, in the name of religion. Look what can happen. So we have no doubt that the whole thing is actually is not the real experience, but it's a kind of reflection, another worldly inclination to become religious. It can also be just another game of the false ego. I found this verse from Bhagavatam I wanted to read. This is from 6th canto. It's a prayer to Krishna. I'll just read it. This is 6th canto, 4th chapter, text 31. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities. Acting from within the cores of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views, he causes them to forget their own souls while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing amongst themselves. Thus, he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. Even great thinkers, great philosophers, great, theologians. What this verse is saying is that, sometimes they're agreeing, they're disagreeing, they're debating over different points. Even you're trying to prove the existence of God or the non-existence of God. All of them, while doing that and agreeing and disagreeing, sometimes they're all forgetting their souls. And they think they're engaged in some very deep philosophical activity or spiritual activity or theological, religious, conversation. That I think this is how it is. I think that's how it is. No, I disagree with you. This is the truth. Meanwhile, through all that talking and all that discussion, Krishna, they're still covered. The material energy is still upon them, and they're forgetting actually their selves and their souls. Amazing verse. Speculating, because even when we have some spiritual truth, we don't necessarily have it. We don't necessarily have it. We know it. Is it changing my life? Is it transforming me? Or do I just have it as a weapon, a false ego weapon? Now I can bash somebody else with this knowledge that I have. You see, it's been taken by the ego. So therefore, this verse is saying they never actually come to the conclusion. Even in spiritual talks, we may not come. So all of us, we're in a state of no conclusion, a state of no solution, until we see the workings of Maya upon us and have a desire for Krishna to lift us above Maya. Otherwise, it's there very strong over, in all fields of life, including religion. Today is the disappearance of Haridas Takur, and there's a nice story with him where he was also able to see just how powerful Maya is. Haridas Takur was born in present day Bangladesh, and he was born to a Muslim family. At that time in India, the population was mostly Hindu, of course, but some of the rulers were Muslims. So they were mixed together in certain parts of India. And so he was born in a Muslim family, but many Hindus were around him. And actually, he was hated by both sides because he became a devotee of Krishna. Then the Muslims thought that he is now worshiping some false god, and they rejected him. But the Hindus also rejected him because they thought, he's born a Muslim, he's an outcast. So from both sides, nobody liked him. And they were even making up lies about him. And he was put into jail at one point also. And because he was starting to have an influence over people, and people were just, again, both sides weren't appreciating what he was doing. Even though he was just a pure soul chanting the name of Krishna, nothing but compassion, but he was hated by both sides. So he was put into jail, and then by the Qazi. And then the governor, who was above the Qazi, came to see him while he was in jail. And he told him, the governor told Haridas Takur, we can take you out from this situation, but you have to change what you've done. Why did you, this was, a Muslim leader, why did you start worshiping some other god? You gotta stop that. And Haridas Thakur's reaction, he just started to laugh. The governor was a little surprised. He just starts laughing. The governor's like a little insulted. Why is he laughing at me? And then Haridas Thakur said, just see the powerful influence of Maya. And he offered his obeisances to Maya. And he said, my dear son, there's one God of all the different religions of the world. It's amazing that you cannot see that. It's amazing that you cannot see or realize that there's actually only one God, and he is the God of all the religions. So you're asking, why did I convert to this other God? Why am I worshiping a different God? You don't realize that there's one supreme Lord. All the different religions of the world are manifestations coming from God. And they've grown up in different parts of the world, different customs, different cultures. Sometimes they have different angles. They emphasize different things. But one who's truly, where the Maya has lifted, they're actually able to accommodate and see where all these things are different manifestations of the mercy of God in our world. And if you follow any of these paths very sincerely, very deeply with the proper guidance, then you are on your way back to God. So anyway, Haridas Thakur just laughed. He offered his obeisances to Maya. Wow, the covering. You think I've come to another religion, another God, but you don't see there's one God and there's one religion with many different forms, many different cultures, maybe differences, but the essence is there. So Haridas Takur was able to see this from his advanced consciousness, and even very intelligent governor. He was offering his obeisances to Maya. Maya has covered you and you cannot see it. There's a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the second canto. There's a famous verse that gives the tattva of Maya, explains again. It's said by the acharyas that this verse contains in a seed form the entire subject of Maya-tattva. If you want to look at this verse on your own, it's Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 34. And this is part of what's called Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam has 4 original verses. And the whole Bhagavatam is present in these 4 verses in a nutshell. They're like seeds. They're very brief, just 4 simple verses, but so much is contained there. And the whole Bhagavatam grows out of these 4 verses. So the second verse, which is 2.9.34, it explains the Maya-tattva, that Maya has two aspects. There's what's called Guna Maya and Jiva Maya. Guna Maya means the stuff of the material world. This is also an aspect of Maya. The ingredients of the material nature. Everything around us, basically. Everything physical. It's real, but it's insentient. The consciousness is completely covered so that we call it inert or, insentient. So that's also one Maya. Everything you touch, everything you see, it's because it's the material nature. It is also called Maya, Guna Maya, that's called. And then there's Jiva Maya. Jiva Maya means the aspect of Maya that acts upon the Jiva, that acts upon us. And that Jiva Maya, I know this is a little philosophical, a little technical, but it's worth understanding these things, because if our understanding, what are we talking about here? We're trying to understand how Maya works, the workings of Maya. And that's a stage that's necessary before we can actually be above it. We have to understand how we're under the influence and how it's working on us. It's like we're seeing it, and we're observing it, we're catching it. That's an initial stage before we can actually transcend it. So therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Takur would say, don't be lazy in understanding some of these technicalities. Don't be lazy in understanding Siddhanta. So Jiva Maya, the aspect of Maya that acts upon the Jiva, that also has 2 parts, 2 features. There's one feature called Avaranatmikashakti, which is, like we were saying, this deep covering. As soon as you're born, you're already completely covered with a blanket where you just can't see reality. So there's the covering potency of Maya. And then the second one is Prakshepatmikashakti. There's the distracting potency of Maya. Prakshepatmika literally means like throwing. Your attention is thrown to something else. First you're covered, and then you're distracted. Your mind is thrown towards so many other things. Everything else distracts us and pulls our attention away from the truth. So this actually, if we look at this pastime, you'll see that the 2 sons of Kuvera, Nalakuvara and Manigriva, they first were intoxicated. When you get intoxicated with drugs or alcohol, something like that, again, it's a covering, right? First, they were totally covered over. You're like in a stupor, and then their minds were drawn somewhere else. Their minds were drawn, in this case, to these ladies, so, and you take a modern example, somebody goes to a concert, they get totally wasted or drugged up or intoxicated first. That's the first thing you need to do. You go to some concert and you're totally just, covered now. And then your mind, is now looking at something, or, you're looking at the stage, you're hearing the music, and that's distracting potency. So the covering potency and now that you're covered, you'll be distracted by so many things. And then from there, so many degraded activities will be performed. If you're covered and you're distracted, you're fascinated by so many things of this world, then that's why these verses talk about also that it can get so bad, this covering and pride and all of these coverings can become so bad, so heavy, that one will become so cruel to the point where they'll even kill helpless animals just to satisfy themselves, just to satisfy their whims. So that's why that's also contained in these verses. So what do we do with all this? We're trying to investigate and understand how it works. And we also have to acknowledge that there's something within us that wants to remain under Maya. That's important. There's something within us that clings to staying under the influence of Maya. We've chose that long ago, time immemorial. And now it's a kind of addiction. We've become very accustomed to living this way, to being, the controller of things, the enjoyer of things. And so there's a part of us that actually wants this influence to continue on. That has to be acknowledged. We may say theoretically, I want to be free from Maya. It's like, you're holding on to this tree, squeezing this tree, and you're saying, let me go, let me go. I want to be free from this, but yet you're holding on to it. So we should know also that Maya, there's a part of us that wants to keep it. So we have to, like any addiction, the first thing is you have to admit that this is the case. See how it's true within your own life. And then you have to start to develop a desire, a prayer. Krishna, please allow me to actually overcome this. I want to see the real truth. Even if it's a little painful for me to give up this false truth, help me go through that process, that prayer, that desire, because there is something that wants to see it, that wants to be under its influence. Like later in the Bhagavatam, there's the story of Markandeya Rishi, where the Lord comes before him. And he's a great Rishi. He was actually on the spiritual platform of consciousness. But the Lord came before him and said, I want to give you a benediction. What do you want? And very interestingly, Markandeya Rishi says, I want to see the power of your Maya. I want to see your Maya-shakti. Because he was actually above it. But something was fascinated, something was interested to see it. And then there's a whole description of how, he gets totally bewildered. I mean, he's sitting there in his hermitage, and then suddenly this strong wind comes. And then these rains, the pouring rain starts to come. Everything gets completely flooded. And then he's just tossing in this ocean, and he's seeing all these sea creatures, and he's being attacked. And he just, he has all these experiences, which is the Krishna again showing this, even though they weren't real or really happening, but he was experiencing it all. And this happened again and again. Anyway, that's another story. But he had this, I want to see it. I want to see this power of Maya. And we also, at some point, wanted to experience, and we still want to remain there. We have to discover within our own hearts why that is. Why would I want to hold on to all this? And then what happens is we start to understand a little bit of why, and we're getting more clarity on ourselves. And then we get more clear on how to overcome. And actually, you can't get yourself out of it. You can't just decide, I'll do everything it takes to free myself from Maya. But what you can do is see how deeply Maya has you in her grip. And you have to start to want to long and desire to come out of it. And so then your life becomes a prayer to God. Please lift me out of this. This is my own. I know unless I wake up first, I cannot solve any problem. There's no solution. There's no conclusion to anything unless I first wake up. So please lift me up, wake me up, and place me at your lotus feet. This is the prayer of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm suffering. I'm covered. Remove that covering. So we'll just end with this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is 7th chapter, talks about how to actually overcome the influence of Maya. This is text 7th chapter, text 13 and 14. I wanted to read. First, Krishna says, again, what we've been talking about. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So even we can talk so much about God, but Krishna says, so long you're under the influence of the modes of nature, that is what Maya is. The Maya is the three modes of nature. Then you do not know me. Nobody can know me. You're deluded. So then how to get above these three modes of nature? The next verse, key verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This divine energy of mine, he's talking about Maya, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. Our acharyas actually say it's impossible to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So the whole key word in overcoming Maya is this surrender to God. It's a very deep thing. It's like an existential surrender. We have to practice surrender in different moments, but when finally, from a deep realization, by the mercy of devotees and from our understanding of things, we actually see what the problem is. No matter what I do in this world, my consciousness is still covered. I want that to be lifted. So Krishna, I surrender to you. Please accept me as your servant. Engage me now in your service. That attitude, that consciousness, that effort starts to attract Krishna. And then he allows us to get some, he's helping us get more and more of this understanding and this realization that we can finally just let go and surrender to him, become his servants eternally. And then right at that moment, Krishna lifts the illusion. And then we see things as they are. We see the truth. And what do we see when we see the truth? We see that everybody is also now under the influence of Maya. And how can I be an instrument of compassion to help them awaken? That becomes your life and soul mission. That becomes the whole purpose of your life, to remove the illusion from the hearts of others so that they can again see that they are also eternal servants of God, loving servants of God. And this is, therefore, Narada Muni in these verses, he's speaking strongly to wake up. And he curses these two demigods. But within that curse is the greatest benediction, the greatest blessing. They'll have to become trees for a very long time. But soon, I guess it's relative. It's a long time, but eventually they will see face to face Sri Krishna. So now Krishna, here in this story, in this pastime, he's going to knock over these trees, these souls that are in the form of trees, knock them over in this Damodar Lila, and they return to their luminous, beautiful natures, and they learn the lesson, and they offer their obeisances and offer prayers to Krishna, seeing him face to face. So within Narada Muni's curse, that blessing was there, that they will also see God face to face. So that's the mercy of the pure devotee. We need that to overcome Maya. When we get the blessing and the mercy of a pure devotee, and we continue to engage in service and pray, and long to be to overcome the influence of Maya, then Krishna will give us that. But we have to be eternally patient. So we'll stop here. Sorry, I didn't leave much time. But
thank you, Ghanashyam. Everybody's appreciating your class. You can look at the chat. Everybody liked it. Very inspiring and hope-giving. I guess, Bhakti Center Temple Room is no longer here. They agreed in Shishirada Mulidhar Shigora Chandra. But maybe we can take one question if your time permits. Can we take one? Yeah? Okay. Audience, this is your chance. This is a live session. Bhakti therapy. If not, I'll ask. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm asking my question. Ghanashyam Prabhu, so you so beautifully explained how we're meant to surrender to Krishna, and this is the only way to overcome our multiple addictions. But I was imagining myself lying in bed, being attacked by the sea creatures, and they're all over, and there's just no chance for me to even move, even slightly. So what's the process for someone who is deeply, deeply immersed in crippled by multiple addictions? There's no chance of me catching them on the spot or stopping them. So what's the actual process of surrendering? Do I practice resilience? Do I just say no? Do I avoid certain things? Do I fight back? Or maybe Krishna comes and deals with them. How does that technically, what's the technicality of the process of surrender and dealing with addictions? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Sometimes it depends on the nature of the attack or where it's coming from. How we deal with it, will differ. For example, if you're being bothered by certain thoughts, thoughts can be let go of. It's a practice. Say, again, you catch yourself, or these thoughts are actually bringing me into, if you catch yourself early, these thoughts, if you indulge in certain thoughts, then they can take you into a very dark place. We have doubts about ourselves. We just feel bad for what we've done in the past, whatever it may be. And if we continue to let those thoughts, again, identification with those thoughts, if it deepens, then suddenly that will affect the feelings. And then suddenly we're feeling this heaviness. So when it's coming through the thoughts, we have to see these aren't my thoughts. These actually aren't my thoughts. Again, we have to hear it again and again to the point where we can actually experience that. So that's thought. Thoughts are light. They can kind of come and go. Feelings are different. If we're suddenly attacked in the level of feelings, then you can't just let that go. Like when you suddenly feel depression, it's upon you. You can't just say, it's just a depression, just let it go, right? Often you can't if it's very deep. So sometimes when it's in a level of feelings, you just have to endure through it. You have to feel it and allow it to kind of come up, come out, whatever it is. It may take some time, but you have to endure through it. You pray to Krishna. You can pray to Krishna. A prayer can come from the heart because you're so desperate, right? But you also have to just go through it and know that, this is inside of me, and I have to allow it. I have to accept it and not just cover it. See, so the other thing is we can do is there's depression. Okay, let me go out therefore and get distracted with something else that's unhealthy and maybe will bring me into a deeper hole, some other addiction, replace this with that. So sometimes instead of just substituting or replacing with something else, you just actually, like you said, you could be just lying there and you just have to go through it and just endure through it, praying for Krishna's grace. So
won't it go deeper? Won't those feelings go deeper if we endure and kind of meditate on them heavily?
They go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then they can go away. So, but if we prematurely try to stop that process, then it's just going to arise again at another time. So yes, you might have to increase the pain before you overcome the pain. That's the problem. We don't want to go through pain. So therefore we seek some relief through some other addiction or some other satisfaction. It's so we cut off the process by just trying to dismiss it. Oh, just forget about it. Let me just get distracted. Let me just go outside and, but there's a way of just quietly going through whatever you have to go through, accepting it. And it may get worse for a little while, but if this becomes a habit you'll see that you're starting to get strength. And when it comes upon you again next time, again, now a little more strength to go through it. And you lose your fear of it. You're only going to lose your fear of it when you make a decision to go through it time and time again. And then you start to realize, I can deal with this. I can face this. I've done it before. So we have to see in different levels like this, with the thoughts, with the feelings, it may be a little bit different approaches. And then also some event happens in life that may be a different approach as well. But I don't want to go on too long.
Thank you, Ghanashyam.
Can I quickly
Gail.
follow up here?
Haribo, Gail.
Haribo. So if you are allowing yourself to repeatedly experience these feelings of depression and not cover them up with some other addiction, you can feel like the fact that I'm repeatedly experiencing depression is a sign that my situation is getting worse, not better. So how do you really understand which one is happening? Am I actually getting worse, or am I, repeatedly, allowing myself to experience this negativity, but one day, I don't know, somehow or other, it won't affect me the same way anymore, or I won't suffer as much from it anymore? How will you know?
Yeah. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to give like the same advice to everybody. Like, in other words, depression can become so deep that what I'm saying may have no relevance when you're actually in the sense of like a depressive disorder, where you're completely in a state of depression. I worked in a psychiatric hospital, so I know how deep it can go. For some time I used to do that. And so I'm not saying, hey, just, go through it. And sometimes for people, when it's that deep, they actually need distraction to help themselves. But that's a very heavy state. So we have to look at ourselves and see, okay, but I have moments of depression, how to handle it. Let me first see what's going on and why. You investigate, you feel it. You also understand what it is, why it's there. We have a little bit of that process. It's not necessarily true that, again, it could be different for different people. But if you're suddenly deciding to face it and to go through it, then you may be finding yourself again and again going through it. And you think, well, this is getting worse. It's not necessarily getting worse. You're facing it more and more. From what I've seen for myself, a little more strength comes every time you decide to truly face it and accept it. A little more strength, a little more confidence in yourself. Now, if you see if it's somehow by doing that process, it is getting heavier and worse and you just can't function anymore, all right, then it's a different state. And I'm not an expert of all the different states for all people. But I can say that if we, for most of us in general, if we're sincere about wanting to face what's actually happening, at certain moments, not every day, not all day, but we're willing to go through it, then that's going to help us. That's going to help us overcome. And we can never fully overcome without Krishna's grace. So, but we'll become more prayerful. We become more desirous of Krishna helping us. And we bring that into our bhakti. We bring that into our sadhana. And that's ultimately the key ingredient in overcoming any of this. So,
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu.
yeah.
Thank you. So,
There's
Ghanashyam Prabhu,
one more question in the chat.
Ghanashyam, you want to take one more?
Can you read the question?
Yes, I'll read it. Thank you for the insightful class. That's from Kartik. If following any religious path leads to the one single God, then why did Haridas Takur not remain a Muslim and follow Islam all the way? Does it mean that some paths are better than others, shorter or faster? But then also, don't all faiths claim that theirs is the best, if not the only path?
Yes. So Haridas Thakur, he became attracted to Krishna. You know, Krishna's God. So there's the one God of all religions, but he has different manifestations, different aspects. So we have to admit, you know, religion is one, but there are differences and there are different things that are emphasized. And within Krishna consciousness, there's the revelation of God in his most intimate form, his sweetest form. And Haridas Thakur, you know, became captivated by this manifestation of God as Krishna. And the emphasis on chanting the name of Krishna, as he began to do that, he began to taste the unlimited sweetness in the name of God. And so, you know, there's also, there's an inclination of the soul. You know, the soul has a relation, every soul has a relationship with God. And the different religions will reveal different things about that one supreme God. And suddenly, you know, you hear about Krishna. He's beautiful. He's playing the flute. He charms the hearts of all of his devotees. You can be a friend of God, a lover of God. You can assist. You know, these ideas and concepts will attract certain persons. And they'll see the beauty and the supreme value in it, and then they'll become sold out to it. So now certain revelations are not given equally everywhere. So even though you can say, you know, true Islam also is genuine. You know, you come across certain Sufis of the Muslim tradition also. You see the devotional aspect that has a similarity with our own devotional process. They also have a knowledge. They also have devotion. They also have chanting. So you're finding it show up there as well. And then you go to another religion, another part of the world, and you'll see a very different mood. Maybe the mood now is not so, it's awe and reverence. And that's also beautiful. That's also a relationship with God. Shantaras, right? So many relationships with God are there. And different religions will emphasize different things. Trying to remember what else was said in that question, but I think that covers some of it, at least why Haridas Thakur, he saw within, you know, yes, so there will be, you know, we still have to be selective and see what is actually inspiring me the most. Where am I learning the most? Where am I inspired the most? What's helping me cultivate the devotion in my heart? So I have to choose a religion, a place, a sangha, you know, and sometimes people have bad experiences with a certain sangha, then they have to go somewhere else. But we should know wherever we go, there's going to be bad experiences because people are under the influence of Maya. They're going to hurt each other and get hurt. So don't rely too much on the externals. See what's beautiful in the tradition, in the religion. Find good association and just surrender there. Surrender there and be patient. And so it's, if you go to one path and you're just very sincere and you follow and you find good sangha and you hear and you glorify God, you're on your way to God. And then the destination of God can also differ because God has different aspects. So it may bring us to different, like Jesus said, there are many mansions in the kingdom of my Father, many mansions. There are, even within the spiritual world, there are many different places and experiences that are possible. And we have to find what attracts our heart, what inspires, continues to nourish us, and surrender there. And then you don't have to look anywhere else. If you go deep enough in that, you'll arrive at God. So that's just some thoughts on that question.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. See, you're in high demand. Everybody wants your insight. Yeah, you're so much more than a doctor, Ghanashyam Prabhu. I want to end it with this. Ghanashyam Prabhu is so much more than a doctor. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everybody, for contributing to class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Haridas Takur ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. And Ghanashyam Prabhu ki jai to you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.